My name is Dave Kieran. I'm the Director of Adult Services at Autism Speaks. So we consider adult services to include everything from transition, employment, housing, and residential supports, post-secondary ed, everything that's happening today in this afternoon session. And soon we'll be focusing also on aging issues for older adults with autism, which we know very little about. But this session today is about employment. And you each have received a black and white copy of our employment toolkit. This was written directly for adults with autism job seekers, okay? We have supplementary toolkits for parents and also for business owners. The business owner one was designed to be something really short, concise, to the point that you can drop on an executive's desk or bring to a local business in your town that kind of describes autism employment, some of the challenges, but really we focus on the positive. When we're talking about employment, and like today, we're going to focus on the strengths and what people with autism can do for business, not asking for charity. We're not asking for a favor. We're explaining the strengths that people with autism can bring to the workforce and how they can help businesses. Because that kind of an argument is how we sustain a movement and build on the very slow start that we've seen. When we ask for charity, you may get one person hired. You may get a boss who says, yeah, I'll take him on. It'll be a nice thing for me to do. But that is temporary, typically, and it's very small. When you show a business that hiring people with autism will help their bottom line, that's how this movement really sustains itself. So the toolkit is for people with autism. You know, of course, it's relevant to you as a parent or educator also. But it's really about all the steps to prepare for employment, including resume writing, how to dress for an interview, cover letters, all of the steps up until and including supported employment. So the different supports and accommodations you can receive at work. Okay. So I'm going to start with some context that is pretty negative, but keep in mind there's reasons to be hopeful when we talk about employment. So the state of employment right now. Well, first of all, it's very difficult actually for us to know for sure. The statistics on adults with autism don't really exist. In the United States, at least, we don't track very well different groups of disabilities. We kind of lump everyone into one big group and we talk about them as if they're all the same, which is impossible to do even within autism spectrum, right? There are so many differences. Each individual is so unique. So that being said, our best estimate is up to 90% of adults with autism are unemployed or underemployed. The underemployment story is one we hear all the time. Someone with autism who is intellectually quite capable, maybe succeeded academically, went through college, achieved a degree, but they're working with a physics degree, they're pushing carts at Walmart, which is a fine job for somebody. And some people with autism, it's a perfect job, but not for that person. He is terribly and tragically underemployed. And so that 90% number, it's not something that we actually cite any longer because it's so difficult to kind of piece all the different data sets together. But you know, rest assured, it's certainly the vast majority. They're living at home and they're unemployed. Now, the reason for hope. This is a hopeful discussion when we talk about employment. Every other topic you're going to go to today can be depressing. Housing, incredibly expensive. How are we going to pay for the supports and the housing for someone with autism for the next 60 years after they graduate high school, right? Transition planning in high school is not successful, incredibly ineffective, and we'll talk about how we can maybe make that a little bit better. Post-secondary programs, again, very costly. This is the discussion where we get to talk about how people with autism can contribute, how they can take ownership of their lives, become taxpayers. There's no more empowering thing than earning your own paycheck and choosing where you want to spend your money, right? So make sure we kind of keep this discussion hopeful. The other reason to be hopeful is there are reasons why businesses are now looking for people with autism. One, I kind of break up, when I think about employment, I break it up in a number of different ways, but one way that's helpful is to look at big businesses in one category and then local small business and entrepreneurs on the other side. They're very different, they have different needs, and they have different practices and different strengths and weaknesses. So on the corporate side, the big business side, they can change this situation overnight. They can hire millions of people. The problem is they're so big, they're so stuck in their ways, they're traditional, they don't like to be flexible, so they're harder to move. Small businesses, local small businesses, can turn overnight their practices. They can become, something totally different overnight. They can change their interview process. We talk about the barriers for many people with autism into employment. The interview is the biggest one. You heard Greg, obviously a very bright guy, presented really well on paper, probably had amazing grades, succeeded in high school and college, and then he walks into the interview room and they see someone who's awkward and odd. Traditional interview where you sit across the table from someone and have to engage in eye contact, kind of lighthearted banter, kind of figure out, it's like a little dance we do. We have to brag about ourselves. Well, asking someone with autism, with social and communication deficits, to succeed in a job interview is setting him up for failure. So a lot of what we do is talk to businesses about that need to change the interview, to either forego the traditional interview completely or add an experiential piece to it, right? So yeah, you may have to do the interview because your HR says you have to do it, but then spend the next 30 minutes showing that person the actual job you're hiring and see if he can do it. Give him a walking interview, they call it, where it's experiential. It's not relying on his communication and social skills, which as a product of his autism, he's going to be pretty weak at. So these are some things that we talk to businesses about. Getting back to why business is interested. So there's the Rehab Act of 1973 had a little passage in there to say, businesses that work with the government and have government contracts should be diverse and inclusive. But they never put any definitions on what that looked like and whether disability should be part of diversity. Well, the good news is that is the movement today. We've done a much better job over the years, we're still not perfect, at including people of different races, ethnicities, gender, sexuality, all those other categories, women. Now, diversity and inclusion is focused on making sure people with disabilities are hired as well. And they're finally getting close to putting some teeth to that law. So if you're a business that does government contract work, which many, many businesses do, you will have to show that you have 7% of your workforce made up of people with disabilities. And what companies are saying to us is, holy crap, we're not even close, right? So they're coming to groups like Autism Speaks, to the ARC, National Down Syndrome Society, and they're saying, hey, where's your list of people with autism looking for work? It doesn't exist anywhere yet, but we're building something similar that I'll talk to you about later. So the point to keep in mind here is, finally, businesses are now coming to our community because they need our help, okay? The other reason, though, it's not just that they're scared of losing contracts or being penalized. They are now the first ones who have kind of led this movement. They are now recognizing the strengths of people with autism and other disabilities. They're seeing that it wasn't so much of a risk and that it actually enhances their bottom line. It was good for business. It's not just good for marketing, right? That's a nice added bonus. If you want to promote yourselves as a business that welcomes people with autism, you will increase your market share. They know that a lot of their customers are people affected by autism and their families. But the real reason why it's working is because people with autism are contributing and they're showing that they can be really good workers. Now, on the small business side, you also have a new movement called social enterprises. So they're like these, mostly millennials who are starting businesses, they are making money, but they also have a social cause tied to it. And we're seeing more and more of these pop up. Many of them are started by siblings and parents of people with autism. And their social cause is to create opportunities for people with autism and other disabilities. So we've actually seen small business lead the way. We're seeing this all over the country. There's certain pockets that are doing it really well. Chicago happens to have a lot of these businesses popping up. South Florida also. Some in Silicon Valley. Now, a lot of the attention has been focused on IT and tech. All the press stories that you're going to see out there on autism hiring is SAP and Microsoft. SAP and Microsoft, I love what they're doing. It's awesome. It's great news. But Microsoft made their announcement that they were going to hire 10 people. The company employs hundreds of thousands around the world. They're going to hire 10 people, and what they got in response was wall-to-wall coverage on all media all around the world. How amazing is this? Look at Microsoft. So kind and so smart. I think it just shows you how hungry our community is for that recognition and that acceptance. SAP got the same response, and other companies as well. And I'm glad they're doing it. I don't mean to put them down, because when they lead, when Microsoft does it, everyone else kind of looks around, oh, are we doing that? You know, that's our competitor, Apple. Should we be doing something similar? And they're following suit. I'm trying to think where I was headed with that next. Oh, tech. So it's not just tech jobs, right? So it's so important for us to recognize that just like most of us don't want to code software and write software and test, you know, hour after hour of looking at the same computer screen looking for mistakes, most people with autism don't want to either. So it's really important for us to recognize that people with autism can succeed in any industry. It really depends, just like for any other of us who are looking for work, what is their interest and what are their strengths? The tech sector maybe was first to recognize how good people with autism could be, but there's no reason why they can't be just as good in manufacturing, customer service, healthcare, anything. It's about the individual. So it's really important for us to remind people when we talk about employment, people with autism are not going to be all software testers and coders. So one thing I want to talk about too is expectations. It seems to me like there's a lot of parents in the room. We need to raise our expectations. Even if you have a child who you consider to be profoundly disabled by his or her autism, it does not mean that employment is not necessarily in their future. Employment at whatever level and whatever capacity should still be the goal, according to their capability. So when we have low expectations for our children and we talk to the school and employment's never even in the conversation about the future, oh, I think he'll probably just go to a day program, you know, all day, every day for the next 60 years. That's a mistake. And school should be doing a better job of making this part of the discussion when you start in kindergarten. I really, truly believe that. This definitely, by law, has to be part of your transition services. So I hope if you have a transition age child, well, in most states should be age 14 and older, that discussion should have started a long time ago. You're going to school to prepare for life, right? All of us did that, and people with autism are doing the same. Transition is supposed to prepare them for employment and independent living, post-secondary education, if that's part of their plan, but they're not doing a good job of it. 90% of people are living at home and they're not working. So what we need to do is change that transition conversation at school, and it starts with parents, and it starts with higher expectations for your children. People with autism who are profoundly disabled, nonverbal, are still capable of work. We just need to make sure we find the right kind of situation, the right supports, and the right kind of environment for them to succeed. And it may only be a few hours a week, and that's okay, right? Start as early as possible to talk about employment. You know, that should be, and I think it is for all of us, our children that go to school, the end result, right? You get so bogged down in the minutia of the IEP, what are his goals this year in math and in, you know, whatever else. But the big goal is that he can live on his own if possible, and he can earn a living and be happy. That's the same goal for all of us. And it needs to be explicitly laid out in your transition plan with school. This is what you want. Otherwise, they may be 21 in the self-contained classroom, still practicing reading maps and doing the weather, right? That's typically what happens. It's not preparing them for the workforce, not preparing them to live independently or to be happy. So work experience during high school is the key. Get out of the classroom and volunteer, intern, or work for pay, hopefully, in the community. Not in a sheltered environment where they're only with people with autism, not by himself in some closed office, with other people in the community, working during high school is the key. If you have any work experience during high school as a kid with autism, you are 50% more likely to have a job in your early 20s. 50%. It's a huge difference. This is where it starts, in transition, during school. Most schools don't have this in their plan. You know, leave the classroom, what do you mean? You know, they're practicing riding the bus by lining up chairs in the classroom. That kid with autism is not going to generalize that now into the community, and he will not be able to take the bus because he hasn't done it.
That's right.
It has to be experiential, real-world experience. And transportation is a huge one, by the way, for employment. Many people with autism who we speak to who are capable can't get to work because they don't drive and they've never learned how to ride the bus. They don't have a transportation service near them. So it's a big one to focus on and to consider about where you may want to look to develop a job for that child. It has to be somewhere they can get to every day, right? We know that half of young adults with autism, 2 years out of high school, are totally disconnected from work, post-secondary education, any of those services. They're disconnected, they're living at home. So keep that in mind. It's so easy to fall off that cliff after high school. It happens to half of our families. Totally disconnected, there are no services happening, there's no job. It's so important to finish those high school years strong with an experience in work so that you can make sure those first 2 years, they're critical. Those first 2 years, they can land a paying job at whatever level they're capable of, even if it's a couple hours a week. So priorities, when you talk to your school, are you want community-based work experience during high school, or internship or volunteers. We get a lot of people with autism, we're trying to help them find jobs, their resumes are totally blank because they never joined a club, they never volunteered, they never had any work experience. Now they're trying to apply for that job at Microsoft, and they're not going to get it. Start building the resume. It's the same thing we do for our neurotypical kids. The other thing that we do for our neurotypical kids that we don't do for our kids with autism is network. Talk to your coworkers. Think about your own company. Maybe not for your child, but to start a program, start some sort of outreach. Talk to your neighbors and your friends and your family about networking opportunities. Hey, who's got a job that might fit my kid? For some reason, when we talk about kids with autism, we kind of forget that this is what we do for all of our kids. Most of our first jobs and or summer jobs, things like that, came from like a connection, someone dad knew from church or whatever, right? Same thing for your kid with autism. You got to do that networking because he won't be good at it at all, yes. Right? That again will be a weakness for our young adults with autism. The one part of instruction that I think does really need to happen in the classroom during school and for job prep is in soft skills. So those are the unwritten rules of the workplace. It's things like interviewing, practicing those interpersonal skills. It's a big reason why people get fired from their jobs if they're lucky enough to get them in the first place. It's not that they're not capable of doing the work. It's that they have friction with bosses, with coworkers that they don't know how to handle, or they come across in an aggressive way when they did not mean to do that at all, and they're then let go, or they are so unhappy that they leave the job. Soft skills are so crucial, and you can learn soft skills.
Okay, if I may share, I work with the county public schools, so we do have work awareness and transition as part of the program, and we do community work experiences. We bring our kids, our students out. Great. And prior to that, we teach them at the beginning of the school year probably. We normally teach them soft skills. Because one of the problems that students with autism experience would be how to adapt to these new environments. And so we teach them soft skills, and then later on we bring them out, and we try to establish networking with the providers such as the employment opportunities for them in the future. Yep. And we do a summary at the end of the school year, how they did their work, the assigned task, and some of our kids or some of our students would go to different work sites. So some of them would go out Monday to Fridays, and that would help them a lot to, plan for their future. We give them the independence of choosing which one would they do well and which work site would they be very productive.
That's great.
And we do that for the county.
I'm so glad to hear that. So which county?
Fairfax.
Fairfax. So move to Fairfax.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Sometimes it happens, but for the parents that are very persistent, like myself, it happens.
Yeah.
But for the parents who maybe work a lot, it's not something that they do. We gotta push them to do it a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm in Fairfax County, and that's why I moved there.
I'm gonna get to the questions. I just want to finish. I had a couple more kind of topics to hit on, but I definitely want the discussion. So I'll go through this quickly and I'll get to you too. Okay?
So it's just the same as her, but
Same.
my child goes to DC school, they do the same thing.
Good. I read actually, there's a great article about a DC school in the Atlantic. It's called The Disability Trap. And they talk about one of these programs. They totally redid how they're helping kids with disabilities, not autism only, but getting them out into fields. They're teaching them that all the curriculum is about the work that they chose to do. So it's horticulture is one. There's some technology, I think. And they're immersed in it, and they're in the classroom for brief periods for instruction, but they're out in the community doing work.
And they're even getting paid some.
They're getting paid.
Different job sites.
Yeah.
And also they learn the transportation.
Yep.
They ride the bus or anything, they learn how to do that.
Right. The old school, and it's not that old, it still happens today. Old school way would have been, autism, you're going to go into a sheltered workshop where you may get paid a couple of pennies an hour for your work. That is no longer the case. The Department of Justice is all over that, and they are suing states that are not doing a good enough job of closing those shelter workshops. For a lot of parents, though, they still kind of see that as the future for their children. I just want to warn you that most likely there's not going to be many of those left. We're talking about community-based employment for as many people as possible. So as parents, what you want to do beyond advocating for better transition services is identify your child's strengths and interests and start mapping out what industries might work for him or her. Also, get to know your local economy. Who's hiring? Who is going by the wayside? So right now, STEM fields, big time. We talked about that. IT, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. But that's not for everybody with autism. But look at also, healthcare is the fastest growing industry right now. There are also jobs that aren't going to be outsourced anytime, right? Home health aides, nursing, those are the biggest growths. Manufacturing, you always hear about manufacturing jobs are leaving the US, and that's true, but there are still millions of manufacturing jobs. And what they're seeing is a graying of their workforce. The workforce are baby boomers who are now retiring. They have a labor shortage right now in manufacturing. Talk about jobs that are routinized, same thing, day in, day out, working with very precise machinery. It's a pretty good job for a lot of kids with autism. So start looking at the economy, your local economy. The gig economy is here. It's for real. This is not something I'm a fan of, but we have to accept that it's here. So this is like temporary employment. The biggest example is Uber drivers, right? You kind of not really working. You're not really a full-time employee of a company. It really hurts getting benefits, things like that. But there are some good things to this. First of all, 80 to 100% of the new jobs created in the United States in the last 10 years are these types of jobs. Gig, they call them alternative work arrangements. That's what they call them in the Department of Labor. But we have to look to it because that's where all the new jobs are. The nice thing about it too, if we want to spin it positively, is it can be kind of like a job sampling opportunity. You can try this job for 3 months, that's as long as the job lasts, then you go to the next one. If you're really good at your job, a lot of these companies hire what they call temp to perm. They start with temporary and then they hire for permanent. So we have to accept what's happening in our economy and leverage the strengths that we can and make sure we find a good fit, just like we would for any other child. Lastly, just a few other ideas. Apprenticeship is like the really old school way that we used to learn how to be a professional, right? Blacksmiths and all that, you'd be an apprentice first, you'd learn from a master, you do hands-on learning, and then you become a blacksmith. That's coming back, and the Department of Labor is really, really pushing this, and certain states and governors are pushing this also, creating apprenticeship programs for students with disabilities so that they can have that hands-on learning and a model that they can learn from. Mentors in the workplace. If you have a job and you're the parent of a child with autism and you don't have the power to hire people yourself, you can go to your boss and say, look, I want to be the mentor here for anyone who wants to hire someone with autism. I can be like the guy or the lady that you go to with questions. This is the best kind of natural support that someone with a special need can have in the workplace. Not a job coach that comes from Voc Rehabilitation paid by the state that ostracizes them, makes them look different. It's someone in the workplace naturally who can just be that support. So raise your hand and say, I want to be a mentor. Can we try hiring someone with special needs? I have a kid, I kind of get it. I want to see this change. And I'll raise my hand and say, I'll lead it. We need more people like that, natural leaders in the workplace to say this needs to change. So a few of our own resources I want to tell you about. You have the toolkit. We have a website called thespectrumcareers.com. This is what we hope to become the list of people with autism looking for jobs. It helps you, it's just like Monster or Career Builder or other websites, but it was designed by a man with autism. And you can create a resume through the traditional resume. You can also create a video resume showing yourself performing job tasks. You can show the employer what you can do. The businesses post their jobs in the traditional way. They can also film videos of this is what the job entails. This is what it looks like. So you can see, here's what our work environment looks like. It's loud, it's hot, it's quiet. So you have an idea before you apply. Then the third user, you have the job seeker and the business. The third user are support and employment providers, job coaches. So if you need help, you can find it on the website. We have 2 million jobs that we can post on the site already. Every big company is like, yeah, sure, we want in. We need help diversifying our workforce, and we want people with autism. Where we're struggling is getting people with autism to sign up and to fill out their resumes. That's taking a lot longer than I thought. But I hope so. I think a lot of them probably need a little bit of help from mom or dad or from a transition counselor or somebody to help them.
We did a video resume, but I didn't know about this.
Cool.
So we already have that, so I
Excellent.
can definitely
The video resumes are great.
look that up.
Yeah, it's not that new, but I don't see it used that often. So we set up our site so that it gets sent to the employer so they can see the video. You know,
That's good.
it's really nice.
The web address again?
Sorry. The important part to remember is the THE spectrumcareers.com. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Oh, the web address.
The web address. Okay. Just a couple more, and then we'll open it up for discussion. We also have a consultant group that we're working with called Advice. Advice is like this long acronym, but it's a group of consultants who are working with national and regional companies to create autism-specific hiring initiatives. So we have not announced this yet, but they are already working with Staples, with Cintas, who makes all of the uniforms for most work that you see, big companies. And they're working with them. What we were able to do is put some money together and ask the companies to match what we're putting in. So these companies are all in. There's some other big name companies too that we're just not quite ready to announce yet. But this advice program is helping businesses become more autism friendly. So far, what we talked a lot about is like how to change the person with autism, make him a little bit better at interviewing and et cetera. That's important, but the bigger need is to change the businesses. Make them more autism accepting and aware and more autism friendly. That's where most of the work is going. People with autism are people with autism, and they have their strengths and their challenges. We need to make the businesses better at this. We also have a small business accelerator program. So if you're a parent who wants to start a small business, but you have no background in business, you don't know what the heck you're doing, which is like what I would do. I have no background in business. If I wanted to start a business, I'd be in deep trouble. We have people now who will be consultants for you that we pay for. It started very small regionally. There was one in Chicago and one in Miami, and now we have money for 3 more this year. So we're looking for the consultants to kind of start that up. We call it the Autism Speaks Small Business Accelerator. So we have the applications for the grant are open now. So the grant goes to like a consultant, and then once that consultant is set up and running, we tell that autism community, hey, here's the go-to person. If you want to start a business, or if you have a small business, but you never thought about people with autism as part of the labor pool, you can go learn about autism there. So we want to create these kind of pockets of expertise.
And I can find that on your website?
Yeah, which we have, if you look at, if you type in, you can go to the search bar and type in small business.
Okay.
You'll get there. And lastly, we have a LinkedIn networking group that has a couple thousand people just talking about autism employment. So feel free, you have to click join, and it just goes to me. Everyone's allowed in, but we keep it private, so you can say whatever you want. You can complain about a business, and no one's going to find it. So it's a private group, but you're all welcome to.
What was that?
So on LinkedIn, it's called the Autism Employment Network, powered by Autism Speaks. So I think if you just type in autism employment, that will come up. If you have a LinkedIn account, there's a couple of thousand people, mostly parents, also people with autism, also business owners. And I post a lot of stuff about what's happening around the country, where there's some success, And then there's people kind of getting together in that network and helping each other out, which is really cool. Now, beyond Autism Speaks, you do have government resources. So here we're in Maryland, right? I first went to DC, then to Virginia, then to Maryland. So in Maryland, in every state, there's a Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, VR, Voc Rehab. 15? Thank you. Almost done, then we'll all share.
Say it again, please.
So the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, sometimes called Voc Rehab, sometimes called VR. This is like one of the annoying things with the different states. They all have different names for this stuff. So in Maryland, it's called DOORS. In Virginia, it's something else. In New York, where I am, it's something completely different. So anyway, you can find it, though. It's all funded in every state by the Department of Education. And it is designed to provide services for veterans, people with disabilities, to get back or for the first time, into the workplace, into the workforce. They have not historically done a very good job of helping people with autism. They really don't. We hope, though, and have some faith that they will get better. In Texas, for instance, there's a woman who works for DARS, that's what's called there, who is a mom of a kid with autism. And she said, this is ridiculous, it's not working. So she now has become the state autism specialist in DARS. And she's created a curriculum for other Voc Rehab counselors to get their autism specialty. So they'll get an autism-focused Voc Rehab counselor. This is the wave of the future. It's as exciting as it gets in state government for us. You know, there's not much that happens, and they're not doing a great job, but we're seeing some glimmers of hope. So the nice thing about DOORS in Maryland is they do have an autism-specific program. I actually wasn't really familiar with it. I was reading about it this morning. It's called APPS, Autism Program Planning Success for Employment. And it's all about employment readiness skills, self-determination, so focusing on the individual and what he or she wants to do, what they like, what their strengths are, and helping them get into the workplace. They also have DOORS Pathways, which is a partnership between DOORS and all of the community colleges and some four-year colleges around the state. I want just to plug really quick for community colleges. I think it's awesome. It's a good way to go if you're thinking about, if you have a child who you're not sure if college is right for him or her, try a vocational school, a tech school, or a community college first. It's not going to hurt them. College can be incredibly expensive and isn't always the best pathway for our young adults to get to the workplace. Sometimes you have a great experience. The nice thing is there are more four-year colleges with autism-specific programs every year. We're seeing more and more of them. But consider community college and consider technical schools and vocational schools that prepare specifically for a specific industry. We're seeing more and more of this happening, not just for people with disabilities. This is a pretty good option for those of us who can't afford $60,000 a year college, right? Career and technical education is getting big funds from the federal government, also through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, which you may have heard of. This is trying to connect people with disabilities and without with better training, more job-specific training and education so that they're ready for the next kind of generation of the workforce. So these are all programs that we need to kind of cobble together. They're not all designed for people with autism, but we can take advantage of them, right? And just as like a closing thought, again, this is where we get to talk about positive and hopeful opportunities. In a lot of these other discussions, it can be a little bit depressing and expensive. Employment, though, is exciting. Things are changing. The 90% number, like I said, we stopped using 90%. One, because we couldn't really back it up with if someone asked us for the specific documentation. But two, because it's improving. We're seeing every week, we talk to new businesses who want to start something of their own. Many of them are starting really small, Staples starting really small with them. But then once they get it right in that one site, which happens to be in Florida, they're going to be able to replicate it through all their Staples stores and all of their distribution centers and everywhere else. So we're on the cusp of seeing a lot more opportunity for employment, And so it's an exciting kind of topic to be focused on. So thanks for listening, and I'd love to take any questions or share experiences now. Hi.
I just wanted to add one more thing with doors. They have a program called PETS. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but it's the Pre-Employment Transition Services. It's relatively new, and again, it's federally funded, and they're only accepting self-referrals. So your school can't refer your child, you have to do it as a parent. We have to make sure that we're referring our children so that they can see there's a need for these services. Because we can't say we need them and then we don't refer ourselves. And they're like, well, we had it and nobody asked for it.
Right.
So please go to Doors, look for PETS. It's a vocational program. Again, it helps our kids to get even more vocational experience. But they will not allow at the present time a school or an agency to refer the child. You have to do it yourself.
Thank you. It's amazing. These Medicaid, Voc Rehab, all the programs that are set up to help us are almost, they look like they're set up to be impossible to figure out. You know, you can't find your way in, you can't get to the right person,
Yeah.
so you got to be persistent. You got to be. Hi.
So I know this is probably just an individual and a personal, but when one is trying to find a job and going into an interview, should one tell the employer that they have autism?
So this is a super personal question. I think, yes, disclose, especially now that we have this new rule where businesses, if you say I have autism or I have XYZ, a disability, they now say, ooh, we need more of those. They used to, the fear was always that you'd be discriminated against. And it's a real fear for real reasons that I totally respect. My personal recommendation is now that, yeah, you should disclose. Actually, one of the biggest problems that federal program is having is how do you make someone disclose a disability? You can't. So businesses are struggling with that, and the federal government's trying to kind of offer tips for encouraging people to disclose. It's very difficult. So if you come forward, they're going to say, oh, nice, we need this. One little story about Microsoft. They made that post. It was by a woman with a child with autism. That's why it's happening at Microsoft, and that's why it happens at most places. She's a powerful VP in Microsoft, and she made it happen. Anyway, she wrote the post. We're going to hire 10 people with autism. When they got tens of thousands of applications from around the world, people willing to move from the Philippines, anywhere. What they also got, though, that they weren't expecting, is hundreds of people within Microsoft came forward and said, I have depression.
Yeah.
I didn't know I could talk about it. I have anxiety. I have autism. I have this. It made their compliance officers very happy. By announcing this program, they got all these people to self-identify and disclose. So that's another kind of twist on this. So my recommendation is, yeah, I mean, unless it's very personal, but yeah, you have now more reasons to disclose your autism than to hide it.
I mean, as far as like affecting wage and, it's just, that gets into that wage area.
It does. Unfortunately, there still is definitely bias and discrimination out there. Yeah. So it's a very personal decision. Yes?
Yeah, I would suppose that companies who say perhaps they don't hire the person with autism would fear a lawsuit that they haven't hired because this person has autism, and that's discrimination. But that's another matter. What I wanted to say was my sister in Chicago sent me a long article out of the paper there about Hart Schaffner and Marks, the men's clothing company, who I think it must be the son of one of the officers is autistic. And the company has initiated a huge program of bringing in and training and hiring people with autism. My question is, you had mentioned something about your website having a lot of different job possibilities. Is there a listing of companies who have formally done what Hart Schaffner Marks is doing, that even just in everyday life, that we can support because of their commitment?
I think it's a great idea. So we haven't published a list like that, but we have one kind of a running list that I think you make a good point. I mean, we want our community to rally around those businesses, to show them support, and that will help nudge the other ones along. So I think we will do that. What we do right now is kind of we published that story about the suit company there in Chicago. We're hoping that they do the same for they have a big factory in Brooklyn that I'm in New York, so I'm hoping they do it there. But for now, we don't have that. What we do have, though, on our site is a page called Shop a Little, Help a Lot. And it's a list of all small businesses that are run by people with autism and their parents often that have some product to sell. We put them all there. You can buy, we promote it really around the holidays. So you can buy your cookies and buy your flowers and your scarves and other things from a business that employs people with autism instead of Macy's or something, right?
So shop a little, help a lot.
Shop a little, comma, help a lot.
And there are a lot of options on there. I've been on that site.
Oh, good.
So
Good.
many
Awesome.
people listed.
And it's not even complete. I mean, there's more and more every year. So, yes, sir.
How does minimum wage laws affect hiring people with autism? Must they be paid a minimum wage or?
So technically there still is an exclusion for businesses to hire people with autism and other disabilities at below minimum wage, though that is likely going to be out the door shortly. So there are protections. There's a certain code that allows certain businesses to get away with it. So that still happens. I don't want to totally disparage it either, because I think for a lot of people, they do see that as the only option. Like, my kid is really profoundly disabled, and he's not going to get $15 an hour. So I don't know if they're ever going to be completely done away with. There probably will be fewer and fewer exceptions made, but I think it will always exist for those who are really, exceptionally disabled.
Maryland is revoked.
Maryland's done, yeah. So it's a state-by-state issue, but it's also federally.
What, that you cannot get paid less than minimum wage?
Correct. It's being phased out. Some minimum wage is going away.
Yeah, almost every state. That is where we're headed. So I think we have maybe time for one more. Hi.
Yeah, I have a daughter who not only has autism, but a couple of mental illnesses. Do you know of any group that's focused on helping that particular part of the population?
So we've done some collaboration with NAMI. Not a whole lot, though, to be frank. That's a real challenge that's facing a lot of our families, actually. I think it's something that we can do a little bit more work on. But those kind of collaborations is what hopefully will lead us there. So partnering with a national association like NAMI. Yeah. Okay, thanks so much, everyone, for your attention. Thank you.